On today's Business Matters, U.S. consumer prices unexpectedly fell in March, driven by falling energy prices. The Labor Department's Bureau of Labor Statistics reported the annual inflation rate declined to 2.4% from 2.8% in February. Its lowest reading since September. On a monthly basis, the index fell by a better than expected 0.1%. The economy added 228,000 jobs in March, while the unemployment rate rose to 4.2% from 4.1% in February. Luxury fashion giant Prada has agreed to buy rival Versace from fashion conglomerate Capri Holdings for $1.38 billion. The deal was speculated to happen before it was announced today. It was in danger of falling through due to recent market turmoil. Prada's namesake family hadn't said whether or not they approve of the deal at first, but confirmed they did by this morning. China said it would immediately restrict imports of Hollywood films in retaliation for the escalation of U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods. For 3 decades, China has shown 10 Hollywood films a year, but the revenue model was already not in Hollywood's favor. Chris Fenton, who wrote the book Feeding the Dragon Inside the Trillion-Dollar Dilemma Facing Hollywood, the NBA, and American Business. He said Hollywood films have accounted for just 5% of the overall box office intake in the Chinese market. On top of that, China taxes those films 50% before any revenue goes back to the U.S. Other foreign markets give Hollywood studios double that amount. On China's all-time box office list, only one foreign film ranks in the top 20, and that is Avengers Endgame, with revenues of nearly $580 million. And Andy Jassy, CEO of Amazon, released a letter to shareholders today. Rather than analyzing the revenue numbers, which increased by 10% in North America year over year, we'll share part of Jassy's letter. It goes into some detail of what makes Amazon tick, and TD Sean Marshall has more.
Amazon CEO Andy Jassy posted his annual letter to shareholders Thursday. And every year, he uses the letter to share insights into mental processes that work for Amazon. For example, when it comes to making important decisions, some of which might not be reversible, there's a simple method and culture that Amazon workers use. They treat the decisions as doors that need to be unlocked. And the key to unlocking these doors is a simple question: why? Jassy goes into detail about what Amazon calls its why culture, asking questions like, why does this customer experience have to be this way? Why can't it be better? What are the constraints? Why must we accept them? Why can't we invent around that? Why will it take so long to get to customers? Why? The letter explains that this is because Amazon is a why company. They ask why and why not constantly. Jassy gives this detailed example. Starting in 1995, Amazon asked, why can't they offer customers every in-print book? Then they asked, why limit themselves to in-print? Why can't they also offer out-of-print books? Why not offer every book ever written in any language, all available within 60 seconds on a device that's light and fits in the palm of your hand? Kindle. Why must all reviews come from professional experts? Customers are great resources and will be brutally honest. Why not include customer reviews even if they sometimes dissuade a purchase? Why not offer more than books? What about music, video, electronics, tools, kitchen, apparel, home furnishings? Why not offer practically everything? The letter goes even deeper into asking the question why and how such a simple question can continuously expand every segment of Amazon's business. Where can you ask the question why in your life or your business? Sean Marshall, NTD News.
Despite President Trump's retreat on some of the proposed tariffs, a report says the remaining levies could lighten the wallets of Americans. According to new research by the Budget Lab at Yale, Trump's latest tariffs could cost the typical middle-class household nearly $3,500 a year. The new estimates factor in Trump's 90-day pause on country-specific tariffs and the 145% tariff on Chinese goods. Trump has not ruled out a possible extension of the 90-day pause. President Trump said on Wednesday he authorized a 90-day pause as part of his tariff plan, but was also raising the rate for China by 125% effective immediately, and then to 145% today in total. For analysis on this, earlier I spoke to Christian Briggs, an economist and CEO of Hardsat Management, and David Hebert, a senior research fellow at the American Institute of Economic Research. Talk to us about Trump's pause. It's pause and go on these tariffs. Do you think this was part of his strategy from the beginning, or maybe perhaps he's seeing what's going on in markets and he got a bit worried?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the show. But I think there was a little bit more to it than just an average pause here. I think what happened was the bond market was starting to show some significant weakness. There was a lot of selling of bonds in Japan last night, as well as China the previous day. So there was a lot of pressure on the 10-year and some other the longer duration treasuries. What we're seeing is a lot of the China and Japan are needing the cash to support their own currencies and their economies. So during the tariffs, there were systematically ways in which that they could create liquidity to support both the yuan if they have to, or in this case, Japan wanted to support the yen, and their economies needed the money.
Okay, David, what do you think? Do you think this was the plan from the beginning, or Trump saw what happened recently and decided to change his position?
So it's really difficult to say that this was the plan, especially when we have mixed messaging coming out of the administration and his inner circle. Consider the fact that just a year ago, Scott Bessent said that tariffs would be a loaded gun on the table, but rarely fired. That's clearly not true. Consider that Pete Navarro said that we're going to use these tariffs to raise $600 billion in revenue every year. But other Trump officials are saying that this is a negotiation tactic designed to lower tariffs for all goods to 0%. And then we have different people in the administration like Howard Lutnick saying that these tariffs are here to stay, that there will be no pause, that there will be no delays. And Trump is saying that he was open to negotiations. And then finally, we have the European Union offering 0 for 0 reciprocal tariff diminishment, and Trump himself saying no. So I don't think that this was part of the plan because, frankly, I don't know that there was a plan to begin with.
Okay, we just have a bit of time left. We have to talk about the tariffs on China. Christian, what would you say the 125% tariff on China right now? How much of it is about protecting American manufacturing, and how much of it is about trade negotiations, or how much is it just Trump not wanting to back down?
Okay, that's a great question. Well said. It's all of the above. The number one thing you've got to look at are two primary problems that China's been doing ever since they were allowed to get into the WTO, the World Trade Organization. They've done predatory selling, which is below cost manufacturing, to be able to hurt and to circumvent various rules and understandings within the WTO's guidelines. They came in with aluminum and steel, which is some of the biggest two elements that are used in any kind of manufacturing of construction. They've been doing that for decades. They also do a devaluation of their currency artificially, and we just hit a 20, 25-year low on the yuan. So these are things that they've been doing willfully to undermine U.S. manufacturing, which is also a byproduct of undermining U.S. sovereignty with the dollar. So Trump is trying to say, okay, that can't happen anymore. I'm just going to do layman terms here. We've got to create a playing field that allows us to be able to recoup $1 trillion a year in trade deficits. So the tariffs are being used to negotiate that, level the playing field. But at the same time, what really has shocked the market was China not coming to the table so quickly. In fact, they didn't come to the table, they raised their tariffs from us. And that's what's interesting about that is they basically said, we're willing to go the long mile. Because remember, China plays the long game. They're not interested in quarters or quarter centuries. They play for decades and decades. So I was really surprised, but not as much as some, that China basically told Trump, we're not negotiating anytime soon.
Okay, David, you have 30 seconds. Final thoughts.
Yeah, so look, trade restrictions on China are just not going to work. And I agree with my colleague here that something needs to be done against China. Trade restrictions are not going to work because U.S. trade with China only comprises about 7% of their international trade. They are so incredibly internationally diversified that they can afford to lose even a titan like the United States as a customer because they have millions of trading partners around the world. So this whole tariff strategy against China is going to fail. It's only going to increase costs for Americans, and it's only going to decrease our dynamism as small manufacturing startups lose access to cheap Chinese manufacturing.
Okay, David, Christian, thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The U.S. once dominated manufacturing. In the 70s, about a quarter of American workers held jobs in the sector. Flash forward to today, that number is now less than 10%. President Trump has explained that his trade policy is meant to revive American manufacturing. A return to Rust Belt glory days will look different, though, in the modern age with automation and artificial intelligence. Experts say any new or reopening U.S. factories would require fewer workers with more specialized skills. The National Association of Manufacturers said many modern manufacturing roles will require knowledge of software, data, analytics, and coding. Before the tariffs announcement, the U.S. manufacturing sector had seen a modest rebound. Several companies, including NVIDIA, Apple, and Stellantis, have announced investments in American manufacturing in recent months. The U.S. and China are in the middle of an increasingly intense trade war. Retaliatory tariffs are being fired back and forth from both sides with no end in sight. The latest rounds are already leading to serious impacts for U.S. and Chinese companies. Here's more.
As tariffs on Chinese imports climb, U.S. buyers are canceling orders. Factory owners in China warned that large-scale cancellations could raise the possibility of a dramatic trade slowdown between the two countries. Based on the duties placed Wednesday, Capital Economics estimated that shipments between the two largest economies could drop by more than half in the coming years. Not only are orders being canceled, the ones for the holidays aren't even coming in. Christmas-focused manufacturers say they usually receive and finalize holiday orders around this time, but they haven't come in. Some Chinese manufacturers had already offered discounts to American customers to help with the initial rounds of tariffs imposed by President Trump. But several now say there is no more room to cut prices without threatening their own operations. This would mean U.S. shoppers would have to bear the bulk of the burden from tariffs. In fact, economic research finds American customers largely pay for tariffs. The new retaliatory tariffs could change the landscape of the global supply chain. Some Chinese factories now say they are willing to lose U.S. orders and are looking for clients in other countries. This could be difficult, though. Other countries have trade barriers in place against China to prevent a flood of cheap goods in their markets. In China's home market, some economists note that Chinese households and business demand have been weak. U.S. importers don't have many options either. Analysts say in some cases, U.S. buyers have limited alternatives to Chinese suppliers.
Amazon could be a key global marketplace where the U.S. and China can witness the ripples of the trade war as it unfolds. Some Chinese e-commerce companies and the online retailer itself are now warning of possible price hikes or sellers leaving the market entirely. Here are the details.
Keep an eye on those Amazon carts. Price updates and availability could be changing by the day. China's largest e-commerce association says Chinese companies that sell on Amazon are preparing to raise prices for the U.S. That's the same message from Amazon's CEO. Andy Jassy is telling shoppers to expect prices to go up due to the ongoing global trade war. In an interview discussing the impacts of tariffs on product prices, Jassy said third-party sellers will pass that cost on. The head of the Shenzhen Cross-Border E-Commerce Association explained that the other option for sellers is to quit the market altogether. Reuters spoke to 5 Chinese sellers. 3 said they are looking to raise prices for their exports to the U.S. The other 2 are planning to leave the market entirely. Around half of Amazon's sellers are based in China. Data shows those companies generate annual revenues around $35 billion a year. Jassy said Amazon has done some strategic inventory buys and has renegotiated terms with sellers to secure lower prices for shoppers. So far, Amazon has not seen a meaningful change in consumer behavior outside of purchasing habits that were in response to inflation.
The interest rate for the most popular home loan dropped last week, giving a boost to mortgage applications.
The interest rate for a 30-year fixed mortgage, the most popular U.S. home loan, dropped to 6.61% last week, the lowest since October. That's according to data on Wednesday from the Mortgage Bankers Association, which said the average 30-year contract rate fell by 9 basis points. That helped boost the number of mortgage applications by 20% last week to their highest level since September. Mortgage rates closely track the 10-year Treasury note yield, which ended last week at a 6-month low as investors fearful of a tariff-induced recession fled to the safety of U.S. government bonds. Meanwhile, the Federal Reserve, which controls interest rates, has signaled it's in no rush to cut them, given the potential for tariffs to boost inflation and the uncertainty over trade negotiations.
Tesla starts selling cars in Saudi Arabia today, a country where on a 560-mile stretch of a major highway, there isn't a single charging station. Here's the story.
Tesla starts selling cars in Saudi Arabia on Thursday. It's a country where a 559-mile highway linking the capital Riyadh and holy city of Mecca has no charging stations. Electric vehicle sales in the kingdom totaled just 2,000 last year, according to industry data. But Saudi Arabia has huge plans for EVs that Tesla has not been able to tap. That's partly because of a feud between its billionaire CEO Elon Musk and the kingdom's powerful public investment fund. But relations between Riyadh and Musk have improved since he took a high-profile role in Trump's administration. In a coup for Riyadh, Trump is set to visit Saudi Arabia in the coming weeks in his first foreign trip. That's after asking the kingdom in January to spend upwards of $1 trillion in the US economy over 4 years. Tesla's Saudi move also comes at a challenging time for the automaker. It posted a 13% drop in first quarter sales earlier this month, its weakest performance in nearly 3 years. It was driven by a backlash against Musk's politics, rising competition and delays for a Model Y refresh. Saudi Arabia is investing an estimated $39 billion in developing the EV sector. And while it might not face angry protests seen in Europe and the US, a lack of charging stations is thought to be an issue, especially as the kingdom's summer temperatures can drain EV batteries more rapidly. Yet Riyadh has massive development plans, which include a goal of 30% EV adoption by 2030.
OpenAI countersued Elon Musk Wednesday, citing a pattern of harassment by Musk. The lawsuit asks a federal judge to stop him from further attacks. Musk and OpenAI CEO Sam Altman co-founded the company in 2015, but Musk left before it became popular. Musk then went on to create his own AI firm in 2023. Recently, he's tried to prevent OpenAI from transitioning to a for-profit model. A trial for that lawsuit is set for next spring. At stake is OpenAI's transition to a for-profit model, which the startup says is crucial to raising more capital and competing well in the expensive AI race. Taiwanese chipmaker TSMC's revenues for the first part of the year are in. They're above estimates in a strong showing compared to the same time last year. Here's the story.
Taiwan chip giant TSMC saw a strong start to the year, but tariff worries are looming. The world's largest contract chip maker on Thursday said first quarter revenue hit $25.6 billion. That was up 42% on the year and just ahead of analyst estimates. TSMC has been one of the big winners from the AI boom. It supplies customers including Apple and US AI chip champion Nvidia. Demand for the new tech has more than offset waning sales of consumer gadgetry, which had boomed during the COVID pandemic. But shares in the firm have plunged since US President Donald Trump announced sweeping global tariffs last week. That included a levy of 32% on goods from Taiwan. Chips were excluded, however, and Trump has since postponed enforcing the tariffs for 90 days.
U.S. stocks fell sharply today and reversing earlier gains from President Trump's decision to delay many tariffs for 90 days. S&P 500 dropped around 4%, NASDAQ nearly 5%, and the Dow Jones almost 3%. And so this is coming as investors weigh the ongoing trade war with China and its global effects. Markets remain volatile amid concerns over long-term trade policy. And we mentioned this earlier, Yale researchers noting the average U.S. tariff rate is the highest in a century, despite a surprise drop in March consumer prices. Fears are persisting that tariffs could fuel inflation. Treasury data showed customs duties rose to $8.75 billion in March. And that's it on Business Matters.